Hello, welcome to this video. So in this lesson, we will learn how to create our sign up form and including our sign up route as well. So quickly in our setup route, as we did in the previous video, we will create our get route for the sign up page, which has our sign up form. Good. So in our setup route over here, we can just duplicate this one and you will say that the get route name will be sign up. Good. And the template we are rendering is signup.html, which we will create shortly right now. Good. So we have our sign up route ready. Now let's create our sign up HTML template in our templates folder over here. Good. Then we can take it from there. So okay. So we have sign up.html. Good. So now we'll bring in our sign up form, a bootstrap form over here so that we will be able to load our form successfully. So briefly, we will bring in our boilerplate template. Okay, good. So we have it over here. Now we will call this sign up. Okay, good. Now, since we are using Bootstrap 5, I will use the Bootstrap 5 CDN. So I'll just paste it over here. Good. So we have our Bootstrap CDN already imported. So in our body, we will give our body a background. So let's do a class. Then let's say BG Light. Okay. BG Light. Good. Then inside our body, let's do a div and let's give the div a class container with the margin top 5. Okay, so now let's load it and see. Okay, so let's restart our server and run it again. Okay, server started. Let's allow it. Okay, let's visit our browser. Okay, good. Let's go to /signup. Good. Now we are getting it over here. Sign up. That is the H1 we just did over here. So meaning our sign up template is loading perfectly over here. Good. Now we can bring in our form inside over here. Okay, so I've pasted in our Bootstrap 5 form template over here. So let's reload it and see if it's loading. Okay, good. Now our sign up form is loading perfectly. So you have our username, our email, and our password the same way we have it in our user module over here. Username, email, and password. Powerful. Then we will continue with our post method for the form. Our post method for the form, meaning we will set up a route that will handle the form submission. So inside our route.go, we will do a route and we will say r dot post. Okay, so this will be a post method that will handle the form submission. Good. And we will say in the string, we will define the route. We will say that it will also be sign up. Okay, good. Then for the function that we will have here in this get, the same way we will have it, but in our case, we will let our controller handle all our post methods. We will let the controller handle all our post method. So in our controller folder over here, we will create another file inside it. We will create a file inside it and we will call it auth.go. So this will be our authentication controller that will handle all our post methods. So let's quickly bring in our package. Good. So now in our route.go, we will create a method over here and we will call it the sign up method. So it will be the sign up function over here. Good. So in our route, we will say that for the post method, we have a function in the auth.go file which is going to handle our post method. Good. So we will do controllers, auth controllers, then we will bring in the name of the function that we are creating over there. Good. So before we continue, first of all, let's create our come inside our authentication file, in the controllers, our auth.go file over here. And oh, sorry, we are supposed to do it package controllers, not package main, because it's coming from the controllers module so that we'll be able to export it. Good. So it's supposed to be package controllers. Good. Now, first of all, we will create a struct. We will create a struct called auth controller. Auth controller. We say that it is a struct. And the reason why we have this auth controller struct is because we are going to bring in our configuration file over here. So our configuration file, so that we can actually access our configurations in our auth.go file for every other usage. So we will declare a variable and say this configuration, this config, it is an instance of the configuration file over here. And how do we get the configuration file in our auth.go file? So we will first say that it is pointing to the configuration file that we have in our config folder. Good. So we will do .config. So this first config that we have over here is the name of the config folder that we have over here. Good. So that is the first one. Then we will access the configuration struct over here that we have, which is this one with the capital C. So take note of it clearly. Okay, so in our auth.go, we are creating a struct called auth controller, and we are declaring a variable called config, and we are saying that this config will be an instance of our configuration struct over here in our configuration file. So before we are able to access it over here in our auth controller struct over here, we will say that it is pointing this configuration that we are declared in our auth controller struct. It is pointing to the configuration in our config struct over here. So first of all, we will just have to access the config folder itself first, and that's the small c that we see it over here. Then we will do .config. So the second config is a capital C, which is actually pointing to the struct over here. You see it's a capital C. So it is pointing to the struct over here. So now you will have it over here. But because we have not imported the whole module of the configuration folder inside over here, we are getting an error. So we can fix it over here. Good. Now it is imported, so the error should be taken care of. So now good. Now we'll come and create a function, and we'll call the function new auth controller. And now what this function will do is that it is always going to return the struct, the pointer of this struct. So anywhere we will use or in our sign up form, in our login post method and all that, anywhere we will just use the pointer of the configuration so that we can actually access the configuration struct over here, because we are going to need the db variable over here, which is pointing to the GORM db, so that we will be able to use the GORM to create our user in our sign up method. So we are going to need it. So we will just have to create a function here which is going to always return the pointer of the struct over here, so that in that pointer of the struct we'll be able to access the config, and that config over here will give us the db, and we will be able to use the GORM to create a new user and to also check the database in our validations. So since it's clearer now, we will go ahead and inside our, before we come inside our function over here, we will say that this function is supposed to return the pointer of our auth controller, struct over here. So this function is supposed to return the pointer of the auth controller struct over here. Good. And we are going to, so inside it over here, we will say that return the pointer of the auth controller. So inside it, the pointer, we will use an ampersand, and we will say the auth controller struct over here. As simple as that. But inside the struct over here, we can't say that it is an empty, because our auth controller struct over here has our config variable. So we will bring that one inside over here in our curly braces, and we will say that it's that config variable is equal to config, and this config that we say is equal to, we are actually bringing in our configuration as a parameter in our new auth controller, so that we will be able to point it to it. So this actually is a string representation of our configuration struct. So we will say that this is a string representation, and it is actually an instance, or it is from the pointer of the config struct that we have in our config struct config.go file over here. So we will just use it as a parameter inside it over here. So as you see it much clearer, so we are saying that in the new auth controller that we function that we have over here, it is going to return the pointer of the auth controller struct that we have over here. But inside it, we are going to need, since inside the struct we said that there is a variable that we are using called config, and that is what is going to help us access the config struct over here, and it should be in a pointer form. So we will say that that variable, or that variable that we have declared over here, is an instance of the pointer of the config struct. So the first config over here is our from the folder, then the next config over that we have over here is actually the struct over here. So in our auth.go file and in our new auth controller, now we will pass the configuration inside here as a parameter, so that we can use it, since the pointer of the auth controller has this config, and it is the instance of the pointer of the configuration struct. So we have it over here, and we'll bring it in as a parameter. Then we will say that it is from the config struct, the pointer of the config struct over here. So we can actually use it anywhere in our method to create, to access the DB, the GORM DB, then to create user in our user database. Good. So now we will have our sign up function, and we will say, we will call it sign up. But since we will be needing this function in our route, over here, we are going to use it over here. So the S has to be capital. Take note of that. Good. Then we can export it in our route.go over here. So in our route.go over here, we will now create a variable which will be an instance of this um, new auth controller that we have over here. Good. So in our route.go, before we load our after we load our templates, we can declare a variable here, and we will call it auth controller. In camel case, auth controller, and you will say that it is actually coming from, or it's an instance of the new auth controller that we have over here. Good. So that we will be able to use and access, since this function is returning the pointer of the auth controller, which will give us access to the configuration, and we will be able to use the GORM in the DB over here. Great. So we will say that this is how we are loading the new auth controller. So we'll bring in the folder of the controllers. So we will say controllers, then we will do dot new auth controller function, the new auth controller function. Good. And we will now import our controllers over here, and this error will be fixed soon. Great. In this function, new auth controller, we saw that in our auth.go, it has this parameter. So that is very important for us to also pass in wherever we will need this new auth controller. So in our auth.go, we will say that it is also accessing, or we are passing config as a parameter, because it takes one parameter, which is the config. Good. That is it. Then we can continue and bring in our new variable here, auth controller over here. Then we will do dot sign up. Good. Now the error is gone from here. Now we are using it over here. As simple as that. Great. So now, since we are passing it in over here, we have to actually pass in that as a parameter inside our setup route over here, so that we can access the configuration that we have it inside here. So that's the reason why we are getting this error, because it is not defined. Good. Because since the new auth controller is having this parameter, the config parameter inside here, wherever we are going to use the new auth controller, we are supposed to make sure that it is also having the parameter of the config. You get that? And when we are using it over here, we have passed it in over here, but we don't have it passed in from into our function for us to be able to access it in our new auth controller function over here. So that is something very important. So we will just bring it in here as a parameter. Then we will say that it is an instance of the configuration, a pointer of the configuration that we have. So the same thing over here. Good. In our setup route, like that. Good. And we are able to pass in that inside over our new auth controller for us to use it perfectly. Good. And meaning that we are supposed to import the package, our config folder over here in our this file, so that we can access the pointer of it and then consequently pass in that configuration into our new auth controller function that we have over here. So let's hover over it and let's do a quick fix and import it inside it, and the error should be fixed. Good. So if you notice something very important, since this setup route is having a parameter, a new parameter called config over here, wherever also we will use this setup route, we have to make sure that it is having a parameter called config, which is actually from the config struct pointer that we have over here. And where did we use that? We use that in our main.go over here, the setup route. So that meaning we have to also make sure that this function over here, setup route, in our main.go file is also having the parameter of the config struct, a pointer of it as well. You see that? Good. So wherever you pass in a method, a parameter into a function, wherever you use that function, you have to make sure that it is consistent and you have the same parameter passing in into it. So in our main.go over here setup route, we can do config inside it over here. You'll see that. Great. And if you take notice of something, we are accessing the configuration struct, the configuration, every data in the configuration from this package over here. But in our main.go, if you realize that in our routes, we make sure that we pass the configuration inside our route method for us to be able to use it in our new auth controller. But in the main.go, our main function is not receiving any parameter. But if you take notice, this is the configuration that we are using it over here. So we have already passed in, or we have already declared a variable called CFG, and it is an instance of the init config that we have in our configuration file over here. That is it. And we saw that it is returning the pointer of the config, so we can actually use it inside over here, because this variable is receiving a pointer of the configuration as we saw it over here. You see it, this function is returning the pointer of the configuration struct that we have over here, and we saw it in the return over here. Good. So we shouldn't go or think very far. We can actually access it over here. So that pointer of the configuration is already being stored in the CFG. So that is what we are also going to use in our setup route over here. But since the name is not, we can also make it the same config name so that we will keep the consistency. You see that? So instead of the CFG, we can rename it to config, and subsequently over here we can rename it to config, and that should be fixed. You get that over here. Good. So now let's come back to our route.go file. Let's come back to our route.go file. We see an error over here with our sign up. The name is the same as we see it over here in our auth.go. Good. And let's hover over it and see what is happening over here. So we see that it says that the auth controller.signup is undefined, because the type, the pointer of the controller's auth controller has no field or method sign up. So what this means is that in every route, as we see it over here, okay, in every route we are passing in this function gen context. Okay, good, in that route. And since we are saying that this function is going to take care of all of this for us, This function is going to take care of all of this for us, and it will handle the post. So it will check for the data coming in from the form, and it will subsequently create the user in the user database. So it means that we are going to need the gen context. Okay, since it's a request, Jen is handling that for us. But here is the case in our sign up form over here. We are not passing it in. So the reason we are getting that error over there. Good. So in the next video, we will look at how to pass it in and do pass all our form from the sign up into our post route. In this case, our sign up function handling the post method for the form. So we will look at that. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.